This is going to be my hottest video yet. That's right, today I'm going to be animating fire. In 10 seconds, 1 minute, 10 minutes, 1 hour, and finally 10 hours. It's the first time I'm doing effects animation for one of these, so hopefully it goes well. 10-second fire. So I'm not going to have time to do much on this one, but I'm going to do like a candle flame without drawing a candle, because that takes too much time. I'm going to try to do a 3 or 4 frame loop. Okay, 10 seconds starting now. Do a sort of teardrop shape. Make it go like this a little bit, then make it rise up. Oh my god. I was looking at the timer instead of drawing a new frame. 3 might be enough. Okay, let's just see what that looks like. Okay, it's not convincing of much, but arguably that is a candle flame. Not a lot you can do in 10 seconds, but I think that's actually not terrible. So for a minute, I'm gonna more or less do the same thing, but with more frames and more interesting shapes. Hopefully it just looks more natural. But let's see. Minute starting now. Okay, we do the same sort of shape. I'm gonna bring it down a little bit. Might do a little bit more scraggliness. And I'm gonna have a little piece come off. This is a candle flame, so it's not gonna be like... It's basically just gonna be one blob. Have this piece fly off a little bit. And then this can stretch and elongate. Now this is disappearing, kind of. I wanna have it loop back to the start. So I'll do an in-between of these two. And then hopefully, oh, okay. That's that then. Hopefully that looks good. Looks good enough. So I'll just remove the last frame because that was the first frame. But this is what we have for a 1 minute flame. Okay, so I think that's better. Imagine a candlestick below and you have a reasonable fire right there. So a minute's still not much time, obviously, but what can I do with 10 minutes? We're about to find out. Alright, so I want to start off by making a sort of wave motion. So we have these 2 frames that I'm going to slowly drift into each other. Basically, the fire is going to follow this wave motion very roughly. Okay, I don't want to spend a huge amount of time on this. I'm going to make this sort of scraggly, like, insane looking fire. So that's pretty organic looking. And you can vaguely see the cyan waveform below it. Very roughly make it follow that, while trying to keep sort of the shape I had going. I want to have the fire raising before it resets. See, the top of this is going up, and all the key shapes, like this bulge, is also going to be going up, while a new bulge is forming at the bottom. 6:30 left. So I'm going to have the top of this fire break off now, and then this can sort of come back down, while keeping in mind all the other shapes are going up, still following the wave motion. Very, very roughly. So I don't like this shape. It needs to be more blobby. It needs to loop, so I'm gonna try to return to normal. So now I'm gonna add a bunch of like sparks and little bits happening. This isn't a lot of frames, but it does the trick. I'm gonna add an inner part to the fire. Get sort of a yellowy orange. So I'm not going like complicated on this, but you know, just enough. Keeping it roughly in the same like shapes and positions as it was, but just following the flame up. This is going okay. I'm gonna do some more sort of little bits on this layer. And I actually want to add some like logs below it. I've got a little bit of time for that. If I can find brown. So this is gonna be a fairly basic stick pile. I'll do some like big highlights. Maybe add more area to this. I can do some rocks as well. I maybe shouldn't be focusing on these elements, but it's okay. Okay, I've got a minute left. I'll add some yellow in the very middle. It's in the middle of these blobs. I'm not sure if that's a good idea at this point. I've got 16 seconds. Okay, I've got 7 seconds. Okay, I think that's good enough. Done. Let's take a look at this little campfire. Pretty good. So I would say that's believably a fire. It is transparent. If I had more time, I would have made that solid. But I think this was more efficient. I'm happy with that. It's pretty simple, but once we get to an hour, that is gonna change, I believe. So that's decent, but it's only gonna get better from here. And you can too, with this video's sponsor, Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community for creatives with tons of classes across film, illustration, animation, music, and so much more. I've personally been learning effects animation from Johannes Fast, like how to animate fire, for example. And let me tell you, that's extremely useful for a video like this. I honestly didn't have a clue how to animate fire before, but now I feel like I can actually make something good, especially for the 1 hour and 10 hour versions. So whether you're interested in animation or painting, cooking, filmmaking, or business, Skillshare's got you covered. But here's the best part. The first 500 people to use my link in the description will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Sounds like a sweet deal to me. So go ahead and click that link to start learning today. Thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring this video, and let's get back to animating some flames. My 1 hour animation of a fire is going to follow the same basic recipe as the 10-minute one. I start off animating a wave and then draw some blobs to sway and rise with it. At first I'm just laying the foundation that I can build on after. Now that I have a basic animation to work with, I can draw a more detailed fire over each frame. I'm making it a little random and jagged, but still following the core shape. You also want to have these little bits flying off to make it more lively. Now it's time to fill in everything with a solid color, which I can adjust later. In the middle I'm adding some orange, and within that some yellow where the fire is at its hottest. At this point, the actual fire animation is pretty much done, so I'm drawing a background which is either some kind of beach or desert. I don't know, there's sand and hills. I'm gonna make a simple fire pit with sticks and stones, which will hopefully not break my bones. For the lighting animation, I'll have the sticks and grounds light up a bit and then do a few frames where the highlights just move back and forth slightly. To complete the fire, I'll just tweak the colors and add a glow. Then it's adding in the rocks and finishing the lighting and background. And here is my 1 hour animation of a fire. It's pretty cool. Semi-lo-fi-ish? It's a vibe. If I were to critique myself here, I'd say the piece that breaks off at the top that goes to the left should really break off earlier to the right. It does kind of stop awkwardly on the right, then flick back. But I think if you're not focusing on the details and not looking at it for too long, it works pretty well as a stylistic fire. It's a quaint little scene. Okay, let's move on to the 10-hour animation. I am once again doing a campfire for this 10-hour animation. I'm gonna start with a sketch of what I want the scene to look like, similar to the last one, but it's in a forest this time. The animation process on the fire is the same, but more refined and realistic. It'll be much nicer to look at. As you can see, I'm starting with the basic blobby shape, then drawing over it with more detail later. Coloring starts with a solid red, then I draw some orange shapes in the middle, then yellow within that. I'm going to adjust those colors later and also add white inside the yellow. Now I'm making a basic background that, like usual, I will redraw in Photoshop. Here I'm adding sparks and more detail within the flame. Changing the blending mode and adding a blur and glow gives it that slightly more realistic look. So now I'm making the full background in Photoshop, using what I drew as a blueprint, but adding far more detail and making it nice and pretty. At first I tried animating the lighting from the fire in Photoshop. I exported a few images of different lighting positions, but it didn't really turn out how I wanted. I realized it was a bad way to go about it because it takes ages to make any adjustment and see what it looks like. So I did all the lighting within Adobe Animate. It's much easier and you can achieve pretty much the same look with a blur filter. Now it's time to animate some smoke. I made a fairly simple grey squiggly loop, add a gradient and blur and it gets the job done. I didn't want to spend too much time on it or have it be the center of attention. With an overall subtle orange glow, the fire was looking nice, so I moved on to more background stuff. In my original drawing I had a cabin in the background, but I thought a tent was more appropriate. So I drew that in and added some other little tidbits on the ground. Then I also animated some, what I'm gonna call fireflies. I don't know if that's how they look or behave at all, but I think it's a nice addition to the scene. And with that, it's pretty much done. And here we have my 10-hour animation of a fire. I really like this. I think it's a big improvement on the 1-hour animation in every way. Not like that should be surprising, but the overall movement of the flames, the colors and detail is just a lot nicer to look at and a little more natural and realistic. Of course, we have a lot more going on in the scene with the background and the little fireflies and the lighting. I guess the lighting looks a bit jittery and chaotic, but fire kind of is like that. And it's a bit of a whimsical animation. Could have gone a bit harder on the smoke, but yeah, I'm not too fussed about that. Yep, no huge complaints about this. I'm happy with how it turned out, especially being my first real big attempt at animating fire. Well, I hope you enjoyed my fiery little animations. Have a warm week, and I'll see you in the next video.